Hey folks, I want to talk to you about this application Readio. I strongly recommend Readio to help grandparents and parents read to their grandchildren remotely when they can't be in the same room. Whether you're living across the country, across the world, or you're just gone on a business trip, Readio makes it easy for you to read to those young ones when you're away. It's a super easy tool that allows for video monitoring across the top of the screen so they can see you and you can see them, as well as having the book prominently displayed, making it easy for you to read to those young ones, or better yet, having them read to you. What I want you guys to do is go to cool-grandpa.us, look for the affiliate link for Readio, click on that link, and sign up today for your free trial. Welcome back. I'm so happy that you've chosen to join me again for another outstanding conversation. Our guest this week is Armondo Garcia, and I met Armondo through our good friend Dave Wadsworth. Now, you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation because we get into some real insights with Armondo about his interaction with his 6 grandchildren. A couple of the things that I'll just tease you about is we get into talking about how Armondo has set up a bit of a book club for his grandchildren to help them develop their reading skills as well as develop some of their interpersonal skills and skills that we both agree feel that children need to be exposed to. The other part too is we get into talking about how Armondo, when his grandchildren reach a certain age, that he presents them with a pocket knife as a way of acknowledging their growth and their maturity to be able to handle such an instrument. You guys are sure going to enjoy this conversation. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. Hello, and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is your host, Greg Payne, coming at you from Studio 12. This podcast is about being the best possible grandpa you can be, focusing on what it is to be a grandpa and how we can all share that experience together for our grandchildren. Hi, Armondo. Thank you so much for cutting out some time in your day to sit down with me and be on the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I sure do appreciate this opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Oh, thanks. One of the questions I always love asking grandpas, because everybody's reaction is so different, is what was your reaction when you found out that you were going to be a grandpa for the first time?
Yeah, I was happy. The way it was announced to me is my daughter, married, had a little Chihuahua, and they brought it over to the house, and she was a female, and she had a little jacket on there that said, "I'm going to be a big sister."
Oh, wow.
So I thought, what the heck, you going to get another dog? They said, no, I'm pregnant. I said, oh, that's fantastic. So I was happy. My wife was just out of this world happy. But then a few days later, I kind of said, okay, so what's the big deal? It didn't really hit me. It was not like a big change was going to happen. And I had a medical appointment. I talked to my doctor, who's also a friend. I said, hey, I'm going to be a grandparent, but is there something wrong? Because I'm really not expecting the change that I thought I would have by expecting a grandchild. And she said, don't worry about it. It's going to happen when the child gets here. And I thought, okay, maybe that's the case, because I really didn't feel that much. However, I was present at the birth of my grandson. And I was in a labor room, and I saw it was amazing. My grandson being born, and that's when it just overtook me. So When I first found out, it wasn't really exciting, but then once I saw it happen, I saw the baby, I was overwhelmed.
Well, and I think too is that it affects grandfathers different from grandmothers when that news first comes out. Because to your point, I think there's things about childbirth and delivering things that, no matter how hard we try, we're just not going to get it. But our wives and, daughters and aunts and people, they kind of get that. And so I think sometimes that there's more excitement or more, they know more about what's going to go on over the next few months or whatnot with the delivery coming up. And then to your point, it really sinks in. I think sometimes with grandpas, when you hold the grandchild for the first time, when you have that physical contact or see pictures and all of a sudden this abstract thing is suddenly very real.
Right. And I think that is, maybe it's a male thing, right? We deal more in reality, and we're not as emotional as the women are, because you're right. They know what to expect. Some of them have been through it. It's like they're having a fiesta and we're on the outside and don't know what the heck. We hear all the noise and clamoring, but we don't know what it's all about, right?
Right. And the thing is too, is that everybody's reactions are different. They're not, there's nothing, good or bad or anything about it. It's just some people react different ways at different times. And, for example, my reaction was a little bit of like oh my gosh, I'm way too young for this. What are you guys doing? You're forcing me into the old folks home before my time. And, so it had some of those thoughts, but you're right. It was when I was able to hold my grandson, for the first time, it was very powerful, and it was very, wow, this thing is real. This is, who knows how long I'm going to be around for all this, but I hope it's a very long time. And man, this little kid is somebody I'm loving on and enjoying that.
Yeah, I told my daughters, because I always wanted grandkids. And I told my daughters once I had my grandkids that their sole purpose was to give us grandkids, so I'm done with them. They don't need to visit us anymore. They've served their purpose.
Right. Oh, that's funny. Now, how many grandkids do you have?
I have 6, ranging from 4 to 12.
Okay. So, and do most of those live? I think most of those live pretty close to you, right?
Right. Yeah. 4 of them live in the same town, and 2 live about 20 miles away. So they're all close.
So everybody's close. So as the grandkids started coming along, how have you been able to adjust, some of your life around that? Because as much as we love them, they are sometimes a distraction, a happy distraction, of course. But, sometimes we get, especially when the kids have moved out, we kind of get into our routines, and this is how we like things. And we love the grandkids, but sometimes they do, get caught up in our feet, so to speak.
Yeah, we haven't experienced that because we wanted grandkids. And what we do is get tired, right? We get tired when they've been over for a couple of days, or they have a sleepover. You have to get up, make breakfast, do all these things. Yeah, that gets a little tired. But we enjoy them coming over, so we don't get tired. We're always asking the parents, don't you have a date night to go out on, or a weekend you go spend someplace so the kids can come over? And even the grandkids ask the parents, hey, can we have a sleepover at Grandma and Grandpa's? It's been a long time, even though it's only been a month, right?
Sure.
They want sleepovers here.
Oh, absolutely. And it's always different with Grandma and Grandpa, right? There's always, I don't know, rules that get bent, or...
what rules?
Bedtime gets extended a little bit, and, some different things like that. So yeah, that's always fun. Have you been able to start to have individual time with the grandkids and start some of that out? And have they been able to appreciate some of the one-on-one time? Because it sounds like they all have a blast when they're together, and especially when the siblings are over. But as close as you are, I imagine there's a lot of times where all the grandchildren are together. But have you been able to start to do some one-on-one time?
Yeah, I do one-on-one, sometimes 2 at a time, because like my oldest grandson, the 2 oldest ones, they're brothers, one's 10 and one's 12. So about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I started a book club.
Oh.
So they had to read books and give me a book report, which is a very basic book report. I have one here, which says title of the book and the author, and then describe the main character. I only put 3 lines on here, And then what was your favorite part? And I would give them $5 for each book report that they would complete. And I said, I don't care what book you read, as long as it's not a comic book. So they would do it. So we would spend one-on-one time after they turned the book report. I'd share with them, or we'd discuss the book. And then we graduated into the book called Magic of Thinking Big by Schwartz.
Right. Okay.
So on that one there, it was a little more complicated for them, a little more difficult to read. So I said, okay, how about if you guys pick a place to go eat, and then one of you reads to me out loud while the other eats or plays games, and then we switch. They said, okay. So we would go to Jack in the Box, McDonald's, or Burger King, wherever they picked. It was up to them. We'd order food, and then I'd have a timer, and I would set the timer, and they would read out of this book, and they each had their own book because one was slower than the other one. And they would read for 15 minutes. Then they were done. They can go play their video games, or they can eat whatever they want to do. And then I would read with the other one. And then after we were done, they had to write on a 3.5 by 5 card one idea that they got out of that reading, like shaking hands, looking people in the face, being polite, doing those things. So that's the kind of one-on-one time that I have with all of them. It's just that one special time. And I like to deal more with the reading part.
Wow, that's incredible, because I think, it's a little bit of a combination of stretching their minds a little bit and exposing them, it sounds like, to some books and concepts that they may not get in school, but then also being able to have that opportunity to talk to grandpa about these things and how to, as their world is expanding, what's grandpa's input and what's grandpa's thoughts about what they've just read and what they've talked to you about.
Right. And I think that's really key. Another thing I do with the grandkids is not the two younger ones, the 4 and 6-year-old, but the twins at 7 and the 5 and the 10 and 12 is on New Year's Eve, we sit down and we have them write their goals. They have to do 10 goals.
Okay.
Right. And the olders have been through it. So we go through it. They usually hit about 80% of their goals.
Nice.
This New Year's Eve, this past one was kind of interesting because one of the twins, the girls, was stuck at goal number 6. And she was scratching her head. She said, I don't know what else. So I said, okay, how about this? How about it's the end of the year right now? What did you get done? And it was like I just turned on a faucet because I had to stop her at 22 goals for the year.
Wow.
It just kept going. So it's really the time that I spend is I really want, as you're saying, I want to expand their thinking. Right? And then we want to follow up on the goals. So that is a New Year's Eve tradition, is we go over the goals and then we set them. Now they're basic goals, right? One goal is, you say, what's the goal? Well, you want to get to, you're in 3rd grade or 2nd grade now, you want to get to 3rd grade. Okay, that's the goal. We know it's going to happen as adults, but they don't know that.
Right.
They have no idea. And that's why I talk to parents, you know what? You need to take a look at it from their eyes. What did you think when you were 5 or 6? These things were insurmountable, right? So that's what I tell you, just encourage them. I'm a big Zig Ziglar fan. Actually, Ziglar is certified. And we teach small incremental steps for goal setting. And with children, it's micro steps, right, to get them going. As an example about developing their vision, we were outside one time with my grandchildren, my grandsons, and there was a bunch of wood stacked up, 2x4s and some plywood. And I asked them, what do you see? And they go, a bunch of wood. Yeah, what else do you see? Well, 2 different types of wood. No, what can be made from this wood? And they started going, well, a chair, a table, a house, all this furniture that could be done. That's what vision is. And you could see the light bulbs coming out. Oh, okay, I see it. You see what things can be, not what they are. So that's really what I enjoy. That's one part. Another part is, I think patience is really important to develop in young people, in young children. So when you turn 10, if you're my grandchild, you get a Swiss Army knife, right? Now my oldest grandson got a Swiss Army knife, and I engrave it with their nickname because everybody has a nickname for me. And on the other side, it has goal, action, plan, right? Set your goals, take action, or plan, action, goal, right? Hold on a second. Let me give it some thought. It's goal, plan, action. Right? So with the other grandson was 8 when this happened, and he didn't get one. And he says, Grandpa, can I have one? I said, when you're 10. I got to tell you, Greg, it was the most painful thing waiting for him to turn 10 because I wanted to give it to him. But I made him wait. And he was so excited when he finally got that pocket knife. So it's just little things like that, but it's on us to have the patience to wait it out, to train them that way.
Well, that's great, because I love the idea of grandfathers being part of traditions, family traditions, community traditions, whatnot. And I think too, in my opinion, with so many of, I'm going to say, the traditional activities, clubs or whatnot that are available to young people, sometimes we don't get those traditions that involve achievement or age, meaning that if we look back at older societies and some of the things in our history is, a young man, a young woman hitting a certain age, and then they're presented with something that symbolizes that they're now ranked amongst, let's say in the case of young boys, they're now ranked amongst the men, right? They're still young kids and everything else. Everybody understands that, but it's like, hey, here's your knife, here's your whatever this thing is. And I think that's an important recognition that grandkids really need and can use from grandfathers, especially. I mean, grandmothers can have their version of this thing, but there's something I think inherently special about a grandfather, a Swiss Army knife or whatever this thing may be, where there is some waiting, there is some goals associated with it. There's some behavior expectations or whatnot. They've kind of got to earn it. And we know that they're going to get there.
Right.
But to your point about, when you're in second grade, it's not a given that you're going to make it to third grade,
Right. Exactly. So that's, my philosophy is I'm training my grandkids to be great grandparents.
Oh, that's great.
That's what I look at. Right. So I'm going through it. I'm teaching them everything I want them to be as great grandparents, to help with their grandchildren, right? To work with them.
Sure. Well, and that's where I think a lot of what I'm doing with this podcast and what I'm trying to do is to wave the flag a little bit and say, hey, this role of grandfather is important and it's impactful when it's done correctly. May not be the right word, but when you have grandparents that are intentional about leading and about being examples and about doing these things, then it has to perpetuate on to the grandchildren, right? And then it helps them, as you said, when they become grandparents, because they remember the time that, oh, my grandfather gave me a Swiss Army knife when I was 10 years old. I'm going to do that now. And this is now your great-great-great-grandchild that's receiving the equivalent of a Swiss Army knife or whatever is going to be in the future. But that's been installed in them by you and what you've done.
Correct. And even the girls get one too, by the way. They're not there yet. They're 7. But when they get there, they get their Swiss Army knife too. So I'm not making any.
Sure. I've talked with a couple of people that remember fondly, and a Swiss Army knife isn't exactly the best whittling knife, but it's an introduction, right? And they talk about sitting, on the back of the property with Grandpa and just sharpening a stick and just sitting there with Grandpa and whittling and having that conversation, but it was their knife and it was their experience. So that's awesome.
My grandson would, anytime we go to a cabin or someplace, he'd like to go out and find some wood and whittle down for some marshmallow sticks, right?
Oh, sure.
So, that's big to them. So I think that's what gives me joy, is being able to pass something like that on. And the longer you can wait, the more patience you have as a grandparent, the better the gift is, the better the tradition.
Right. No, I absolutely agree with that. Now, one thing I'm interested in is, what are some of the differences that you're finding about yourself with dealing with younger children versus when you were the parent and you had your children were at the age that your grandchildren are.
It's a responsibility difference, right? I don't feel responsible for them because that's a parent's job. My job is of support, right? It's not to be making sure they're good kids, although they are, but mine's support capacity, which means they can tell me secrets that they can't share with their parents. I know stuff that they might get a little bit of trouble that I know, and I help them through it that the parents won't know. As a parent, you can't tolerate it. You have to be pretty firm about those things. So the biggest part is patience, right? I've been through having children, and I know that it's not a straight line from childhood to adult, right? And as a parent, when the little squiggles take place, as a parent, you freak out. But as a grandparent, you know everything's going to be okay, right? You have more tolerance, you have more patience, and you just support them, knowing, hey, they're going to come around. Don't worry about it. But that's the biggest difference, I think, between a parent and a grandparent, from my perspective.
No, and that's great insight, because I think too is that as a grandparent, we can compartmentalize life a little bit, let's say, better than when we were in our 20s or 30s or 40s and having little kids ourselves, because I think a lot of times at that age, you're thinking about the next business deal that you're working on, as well as trying to attend to your children and your family's needs. There's the pressures of work and life and some of these other things that can come into play. Whereas a grandfather, I think we can put off some of those pressures a little bit and focus in on the grandchild. And to your point, have more patience with it, right? We go, oh, this thing will sort itself out. To your point, you got a little blip here, but you know what? They're going to come back down to the trend line, and it's going to be okay.
Exactly. That's so true. Yeah. So, even in sports, I help coach their sports in baseball. Now, once you get past 6, I'm not very good at coaching anymore because the ball comes too fast in baseball and softball. But up until that point, I can deal with that. And that gives me some one-on-one time with the grandchildren, right, in sports, because they love it. And that's what I feel, I guess, kind of bad about what parents have. Parents today have so many demands on them with the extracurricular activities, with work. I mean, with the whole COVID, they're actually working 7/24 when it's all said and done. Their minds are always at work at this point. And as a grandparent, I think it's my job to give them some relief, because I look at my grandkids not as the children of my children. I look at them as partly some of what my responsibility to support my children in raising the grandkids and giving them a break, right? Because times are different. They're so demanding on parents today that grandparents really can help out in raising the grandkids.
No, I love that. And I love the fact that you're very intentional with being able to step in where you can and lighten that burden some, because we've talked about, ages of growing up. And right now, to your point, there's so much going on, and moms and dads have got cell phones in their pockets, and work is calling them at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and these different things. Right. And there's expectations of answering those phone calls and doing these things that where grandparents can step in. And if you're fortunate enough to be in the same town, maybe you can grab dinner, take the kids a little bit, give them somewhat of a break. Certainly not take over that parenting role, but give the parents enough time that they can decompress, that they can deal with what's urgent, so that they can then have the patience and the energy to deal with what's important, which is the children.
Right, exactly. I think that's so important. It's going back to raising a child, right? It's the grandparents, it's the parents, it's the uncles, the aunts, it's the whole family. It's a family, I'll call it a family affair. And I think we've gotten somewhat away from that. And only because I think people are traveling, they move away with their job, away from family, so they don't have a good connection in the town they go to. And maybe that's something that really should be addressed, is how do we establish some family type connections in a town? And what I mean by that is developing friends into something that could really help us out, and we could help them too.
Also, one of the things too that I like to call out with men as they're starting to get with adult children and getting into this grandparent phase is that our impact doesn't have to be limited to just our grandchildren. To your point, you're coaching probably T-ball and maybe double A. And so those kids, all those little boys and girls on the team, they're all needing your patience and your insight and, knowing how to deal with them when they're having a meltdown because school didn't go well and this is happening. And, they kind of need that older male and female presence in their lives. And whether that's a biological grandfather or somebody of our age that can, step back and kind of deal with that meltdown a little bit and help them through that and show them that, hey, it's going to be okay. And then here's the goal for what we're going to do for the rest of practice, right? We're going to have fun. Don't worry about school. The goal is let's get you out there. Let's have fun. Let's hit the ball a little bit and do the best you can and enjoy practice.
Right. Exactly. I totally agree with you, Greg. One of the things is as we become grandparents, we have a lot of experience and we know the what I call the behind the scenes stuff. I see a lot of coaches out there that when kids make a mistake, miss a ball, goes between the legs, whatever, they yell out, shake it off. Right. And I thought to myself, well, what does shake it off mean? Right. Forget about it. Well, how do I do that? What's the tool for that? So I taught my kids who I coach is that means that you go and see yourself doing the play right or rehearsing that right. And it only takes a split second. So when I say shake it off, that means rehearsing that you did it correctly. Right. And those are the things that coaches don't teach, but as grandparents, we know how the back room works, right? And we're able to see it and be able to share that information with the kids.
Well, and that's great insight too, because I hadn't thought about that term shake it off in the same way of visualizing the mistake or the misplay as, run through it again, but make it successful so that you can reset yourself. I have heard and grew up with the shake it off. I always took it into you have to ignore it, put that play behind you, focus on what's in front of you. But I think that lesson is great for, and hopefully the kids as they get older will take it forward. So when they mess up a quiz at school and they do these different things in their lives, that they're able to go, oh, coach said shake it off equals, visualizing doing better and then reframing that so that you can be set up for success the next time it happens, that you're not freezing up, that you're not reliving a negative past. So it's interesting.
Exactly. And then congratulating them or being happy about any kind of little improvement that they make. There's a lot of talk about, I hear it, about participation trophies, very negative. My thought is it's not a negative thing. It's the way we implement it. Because if you're in the race, you join the race. If you're there at the end of the season, you've accomplished something. You should get something for that, some recognition, especially at a younger age, to give you the momentum, right? Because without that, I think participation trophies give momentum. Now, should they be trophies? Should they be certificates? I don't know. We can debate that. But there should be something that recognizes the effort they put in, right? Because they did show up and they did complete the season. Let's provide some kind of reward for that. As adults, we won't need that anymore. It's like, and maybe this is being oversimplistic, but how you train a dog is you give them treats, and then after a while you take the treats away and they continue doing the behavior that you wanted them to, right?
That's a great insight. And I'm wondering too, if some of that is because you've had the perspective of going through raising children and where we are now with our careers and our lives, being able to recognize that, hey, whether it's participation awards or being able to give that positive feedback continually and celebrating those micro steps, right? Because you had talked about when you're setting those goals, and especially with that Zigler background about, small incremental steps lead to big compound wins. with the little kids, it's, hey, did you actually pick up the towel off the bathroom floor and hang it up? And if they did, it's, hey, great job. Way to go.
Celebrate.
But I do know, and I remember of myself being very guilty as a parent of not doing that, of always having, I wouldn't say I was always a stick person, but I think as parents, as we talked about with daily pressures and different things and trying to correct kids back to a trend line, of not always understanding how important positive reinforcement can be. And that's not to your point of, hey, everybody is special because they're just there, but it's, hey, you're special because you stuck it out through the season. You endured. And sometimes, and I was on those soccer teams and little league teams where we went 2-10 and it was miserable and I wanted to quit. Thank goodness I wasn't allowed to quit. But at the end of that season, right, hey, you guys stuck it out. It was a tough season. We appreciate you doing this. And it's a lesson that we'll be carrying forward in our lives. Right,
exactly. And I'll go back to, as a parent, you're not going to be telling the child or celebrating little wins because you're a parent. You're trying to provide shelter, provide food, provide clothing, provide education. You're doing all these things. You're not going to be perfect in that area. That's the void a grandparent should be filling.
Oh, and I was going to ask you about that too, as far as being able to also support your grown children in this role, because it seems like you've got a great relationship with the grandchildren, with the book club and with these goals. And then how do you transition some of that information and some of that with the parents? And how do you guys get on the same page? What are some of the tips and tricks that you guys use to communicate?
Yeah, thanks. That's a real good point, real good question. And it's what I call collateral influence. It's the opposite of collateral damage, right? So when your children see what you're doing with your grandparent, like with the coaching, the goal setting, right after we're done, the mom says, well, let's go put these into your computer. They get excited because they're seeing that, right? They're seeing some activity, they're seeing some growth happen. They will get involved, but they are your children, so you can't tell them what to do. Right? We know that as parents. But if you influence them and they start seeing you and they start seeing their children come along that way, they want to participate. So it's leading by example, basically. That's how you sum it up. They will follow if they start seeing good progress in their children.
Oh, sure. And we're there for support. We're not there to parent, even though, and it's weird for me because I'm thinking that I'm still in a parent role with my adult children, but it's a different role. It's that consulting hat that we put on, right? It's the, because they don't need us anymore to tell them to brush their teeth. If they're in their 30s, 40s or whatever, and they're not brushing their teeth, there's other things going on, but we do need to be consultants in that, having that open communication, having that influence with them so that they feel comfortable coming to us and going, hey, mom and dad, we're struggling with X, whether it's with grandchildren or just within their own lives, so that they still feel comfortable reaching out for that support. And it's a balancing act, I think, in some ways, because just like when we were parents, we want to get in there and we can fix it. We'll take care of it. But how do you deal with some of that now? Because with your background being I think a Zigler coach and some of the other maybe 48 Days community and some of these other things, how do you sit back and put your own boundaries in place so that you don't jump in and take over?
Oh, that's hard, because one of the most painful things to watch is when the grandchildren being reprimanded by a parent. That just it hurts me, mm-hmm. Right? Because you're seeing that. I mean, now there's no corporal punishment, but just yelling at them, or it bothers me. So it just takes, the only way I deal with it is I just wait, know that it's it's just natural to be that way for a parent, right? And then just wait it out, step aside, and let that happen. I do not interfere with their reprimanding. That I know not to do, right? So how do you deal with it? I really don't have any way of how to help you other than I know what I do, and I just back away, knowing that it's a natural process. And by tomorrow, they're both going to forget it even happened. So my job is just to wait until tomorrow, and then everything's going to be fine.
That's great advice because so many of us, like I said, want to jump in and do the right thing, but we've got to let the parents parent. Sometimes that can be hard, and sometimes we've got to, walk away and go get a glass of water.
Or something stronger, coffee, tea, or something else.
Sure. Now, one of the questions I've got for you too is, I'm excited about this book club and this reading. How have you when did you start that? And do you think that maybe that was started too young, given that the oldest is now 12? Do you start, if you had to implement this over again, I guess is where I'm going, do you start where you started, or do you start maybe when they are 12 and they're starting to read at that intermediate level?
Yeah, well, the book club for the 12 is dead, and so the 7 is also because they're reading at such a high level in school now. I mean, it's already taken root. You only have to do it a couple years, and then it takes root in school. Right? I started, one was 5 and one was 7. That's when I started. Okay. And I also had some pens ordered, which were I think like 97 cents each, and I had them engraved with GLAD, Glad. And my grandson's names are Ashton and Declan. So I wrote on there, GLAD stood for Grandpa Learns from Ashton and Declan. So I totally switched it on them. So they were kind of proud of that because they're learning, I'm learning from them. And that's how I've approached them, or approached the learning process. I learn from them. Another thing I do is there's a little app that I have on my phone that you hit it and 3 words spin up, 3 non-related words, and you're supposed to make a story out of it, right? A couple sentence story real quick. So we would do that at dinner time at times. We go around the table and all the grandkids would have to make up a story. I don't care how simple it was. They were congratulated. Hey, that's a great story. And they just love that thing. Actually, one of them would try, can we do this again? Can we do this again? It's just fun. See, I believe that children have this really creative imaginations, and it's just on all the time. And we need to release it, not harness it, release it in productive ways. Reading is one, and also coming up with stories. They love to make up stories if you guide them.
Sure. Now, have you had them start to write out any short stories?
I think the oldest one did. I have not participated in it.
Oh, okay.
I have.
Okay, so it hasn't morphed into that creative writing side yet.
No.
Okay.
No, have not yet. But that's a good idea, right? But see, Greg, it takes money. I have to compensate her. Maybe it's a $10, but it's worth the investment, right? Maybe it's a $10 short story, right? Even if it's a 1 page. Right?
Yeah.
I think this is what, I don't know if you can really see this.
I can make it out. And
that's the book report.
He's showing it's a 1 page, computer generated book report, couple of lines.
And that graduated to the reading of the thinking, the magic of thinking big, and doing the 3x5 cards with the one thing they come away with. Just one. That's all I ask.
Okay. Now, have you had them start to read any of the old, like, let's say classics, the how to, win friends and influence people, or Think and Grow Rich, or any of that?
Yeah, no, not yet. I got him a gift about 7 months ago. I haven't followed up with it. I got him The Greatest Salesman in the World, of Mandino. So we will hit those. Right now, the 12-year-old is involved in sports. So the only time I get with them now is to go watch a sporting event, because they're on travel. He's a high-level athlete, so they're traveling all over the place.
Gotcha.
So it's hard to sit them down to do stuff right now. So
right.
As a grandparent, you have to realize that too. You can't force them, because as they get older, they get their own social life. And that's when grandpa and grandma have to back off and back away.
Sure. Well, and do you find it's back off and back away, or engage with them with what their interest and what drives them as they're getting to be 12 years and older, let's say, right? Because the oldest is traveling baseball. So I'm sure he's probably watching ESPN when baseball season's in play with whatever his favorite players are, his favorite teams. Do you find that you connect with him, at that level with talking baseball and talking, who did what, and even bringing up some of the players that you admired?
Yeah, they really don't talk much about that. They're more players. They're not really. They like more the PlayStation games, right? What's that? Combat games. That's what they're into when they have a little free time, or they actually like to go play in the court. They go out play basketball. They're very active. And what I mean by back away is you stay engaged, but in a different sort of way.
Okay.
Right. You're there for them. You go to their games. You congratulate them. You're always there for them. You're just not as much part of their social life as you used to be.
Right. Right. Well, and all that's very normal, because as they start to hit that middle school years and everything else, to your point, they've got their own friends, they have their own interests, and they are, just as we experienced as parents, there's that pushing away a little bit from the parents, and there's that, really getting their own identities, and, so a little bit of natural rebellion that goes on. This is mom and dad's views, but I'm going over here just because mom and dad aren't over here.
Exactly. That's so true. And I'm just ready for, if something happens that's bad, they get into a little trouble. My hope is that they call me, right? If they're afraid to talk to their parents, that they can call me and work it out. Now, I may have to go back to their parents, but maybe I can help smooth things over, right?
Right. And certainly depending on what that issue or what those questions, are, because we certainly don't want to keep important things away from their parents. But at the same time, too, I think in that role of confidant that we start to take on a little bit more as they hit those middle school years, I think keeping confidences, and again, there's a little bit of a difference between, my grandson came up and talked to me about girls a little bit. That's one thing versus, something much more serious that mom and dad really need to be aware of.
Yeah, totally agree.
I think you can't get to that second part, that confidant, unless you've had that early relationships with them, that get down and play cars with them on the carpet and have them over for sleepovers and do that. So, that it's great that you've been able to establish those relationships so that they can mature and they still feel comfortable coming to you.
Yeah, that's true. And you're right. It takes a while to build that relationship. It takes time. My wife always says that the best thing you can do with a child is spend time with them, right? And that's how you build a relationship. I don't know of any other shortcut.
Right. And I don't think there is one. That's the whole, and we're in an age of, we've got to learn how to hack this and hack that. And what's the shortcut to this? There's no shortcut to these relationships. It's time in, and it's doing what they want to do. And it's picking and choosing our moments for, reading books and sharing ideas with us and showing up to baseball games and doing these things so that when they're teenagers, just like when we were parents, they do feel comfortable coming to us to ask us questions, to, whatever those might be. But there's no shortcut to that relationship.
No, there's no shortcut. And, I think we have a friend in common, Dave Wadsworth, who wrote the book. Yeah, about all these bugs and the stuff he used to do as a kid in the ditch. What's it called? Two Boys in a Ditch, or something to that. But I read the book and I bought a copy for all my grandkids, and Dave signed them, the author for them, which was pretty cool. But I think that's a magical book, because that's what kids love. They like playing with bugs. They like going out in the water. They love doing that. And I think our society now has gotten so restrictive on the kids. We just don't let them do the things that kids are really supposed to do.
Oh, yeah.
Explore. How's that?
Explore and then come back and tell grandpa about the victories and the weird stuff they saw in the creek and
Yeah,
the weird beetle that was growing on, going up the back of this tree and stuff like that. I mean, that's part of that little bit of like, hey, go on out into the world, explore, do your thing, and then come back, just like with the book report, and tell me about it. What'd you see? What'd you learn? How many honeybees did you capture in the jar? What was going on?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, bugs around the house. I have a good sized yard here, and my wife is always, when the kids come over with the butterfly nets, and they're catching caterpillars, and they're catching butterflies, and they're catching spiders and lizards, and the kids love that stuff.
Now, Armondo, I've had you on for a while, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to bring up or talk about anything that I might have missed, or any topics that you would like to share with us.
Yeah, you covered everything pretty well, Greg. What I do want to emphasize, though, is goal setting. And goals are not something that has to be, you don't have to pay $1,000 for a program or $200. A goal is nothing more than a plan. A simplified to-do list is a goal, right? Each one. And to get momentum, you just have to start small, especially with the grandkids. Just celebrate their little wins, right? I know that if they go out, and let's say you take your 9-year-old grandson or granddaughter out to go play golf, and they whiff the ball of the tee. Well, I congratulate them because I say, that's a great swing. Right? And I see parents saying, no, you need to be able to hit the ball. You did this wrong. You got to adjust this. You got to do that. I look at the simple things. What did you do right? You stepped up and you took a swing. That's good. Let's start there. That's a starting point. So that's what I'd like to leave you with, is celebrate the little stuff so that the children, the grandchildren, have something to build on.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I think too, and it's something that's really come forward in our conversation, is that grandparents can be a great tool for helping kids start to visualize and start to plan and set those goals. And then we can be a little bit of their accountability partner.
There you go.
We're not we're not mom and dad. We're not a teacher. There's no real risk involved other than our encouragement and our checking in with them, because these are great opportunities for us to take them out to, Shakey's Pizza, or take them to wherever and have a conversation about, hey, where are you with this goal? You're halfway through your second grade year. How's it looking? Are you going to make third grade? And have those conversations.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we're blessed, and we take the kids. We all go to Disneyland every year, right? The whole family. So that's for my birthday. So they've relayed that for my birthday, what I want is we go to Disneyland. So when I'm long gone, Disneyland will be attached to my name.
That's awesome. Well, Armondo, I really do appreciate you taking the time out to sit down and talk with us about your experience with being a grandfather and the wisdom that you've shared with us during this conversation. And I just want to really say thank you again for this opportunity to be with you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the opportunity to share this. So maybe, hopefully, somebody can get some use out of it.
I'm sure they will. Thanks. What a cool conversation this was. I really enjoyed learning from Armondo about how he balances his role of grandfather to that of a parent. I think it would be very tempting when the grandkids live very close to you to step into that role and maybe step onto the toes of the parents. I like how he's been very intentional about carving out that space for being a grandfather, for being that sage, and for being the encourager. I also enjoyed very much that he's involved in those sports activities where he's able to be there and encourage all those little kids and give those kids that wisdom that comes from his experiences. I also enjoyed learning about this concept of collateral influence. I thought that was really, really cool and a great phrase for how our input and encouragement and our influence can spill over to the kids and the grandkids, and how that just helps strengthen the family overall. What were a couple of your aha moments and takeaways from this conversation? I'd love for you to go to my website and be able to leave me a comment. Let me know what your big aha and takeaway was from this conversation with Armondo. I'm also going to be sure to put in links to the show notes for the conversation that I had with Dave Wadsworth, as well as his book that Armondo and I had discussed. So be sure to go to the show notes, check out the links there so that you can dive in and find more details about what we were talking about. So until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.